I don't know why it doesn't keep my settings anyway. Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Rebecca going for the complete photo op, no live motion, nothing to distract anybody.
It's way better than how I look right now.
You got me and not you.
Just then we have both. Hi there, Richard Wilson and Austin Knight are here. We're sharing a screen, so you'll see half of each of us.
Okay. Where's your
The
mask?
lovely lady in the background.
The lady in the background, we don't know who it
I
is.
believe it's a Hawthorne painting.
No.
And we have with us here also Eric Smith, who is representing Whitewater. So just so you know who he is.
Who's Whitewater?
We're gonna give it a couple more minutes because we're short. Couple of our members here.
It looks like you're in a nice place there, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sitting out on my porch.
Yeah, very nice.
Austin, in answer to your question, Whitewater's they are the water systems operator. They're
Kurt, you're not on video?
I thought I was, but black looks better to me.
Okay.
You need a photo op, Kurt.
So I see that Catherine is.
You need a headshot.
Yeah, it was wrong. Oh,
Yeah,
I
you
know
look lovely
why.
still there.
There we go. I know why now.
Right.
I have this little clever gadget that covers the,
Yeah.
I
So-
have the same thing.
Yeah.
So people don't spy on you from the outside world, Kurt.
Exactly.
Anyway, I got one of those things and put it on, and my wife made me do it, and I just leave it. I don't, I can't get too paranoid about all that stuff.
So the people in black in the planes you have to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I think we can get started. We have 4 of our committee here, the commission here with us, so we can get started. And Richard, I would suggest that we let you guys go first.
Appreciate that.
We can hear what you've got for us, and then we can move ahead.
So we met with you, I think it was last fall or early winter, and discussed opening up Witts Lane with a 2-inch curb stop. And we've talked with our company about bringing the line up the property owned by Heidi. I don't know, I can't remember her last name, but it's 16 Masonic Lane. Her property actually goes all the way down to Witts Lane. So we bring a line up from Witts Lane to the Masonic Lane, and then it would service my house at 25 Masonic Lane. I have a vacant lot, so I'd leave a stub for the vacant lot at 30 Masonic Lane. And it would also bring water down to the Masonic Lodge and to the Coughlin's property at 100 East Commercial Street. I think it's 100.
I'm sorry, which one is that now?
That's the house. They have the Golden Cod Gallery down on Commercial Street itself, and then their house is actually up at the top of the hill. They have a house and a.
The house is right across from the lodge driveway. It's literally right there. We're across from each other.
So
I'm-
but don't they have a curb stop already down on East
They
Commercial?
do, they do. But this would be, if we're bringing a line down, it would be more convenient for them to hook up there and tie it into their house than to bring it up the hill.
So we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5, correct.
Correct.
So I'm going to ask either Eric and/or Neil to comment on the 2-inch line. Are we okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
And Neil and I had this discussion already because we're looking at have areas of the town where we have several properties serviced by a two line, so that, and it has not been a problem for us on any of those. Eric, you have any?
Yeah, the only comment I have is I kind of, I really like what they're doing because it's taking advantage of the main structure. And I think there's going to be other parts of Wellfleet where, where a smaller spur makes a lot of sense to pick up a group of customers, and they've done the legwork to, get these other homeowners interested. And they're coming forward with a proposal that I think makes a lot of sense.
So do you have numbers, Richard, on what this is going to cost to bring the line up?
To bring the line up and to get it into the existing 4 houses will probably run close to 40 grand when we get through with it.
Well, I think this is something that the water commissioners want to take up as a question as to what we do if there is going to be a connection fee for that, what it would be. So I'd like to, we would need to table that for another meeting to discuss the connection fee. But if it's that much, rather bring the line up the hill and for you guys, then in all likelihood, we would be recommending that there not be a connection fee.
May I just say one thing, Mr. Chairman? This is Austin Knight. If there was a connection fee, believe it or not, then the lodge may not be able to really get involved in it at this point. And I don't believe Jack at this point. We're trying to get whatever we can because we have a large investment between all of us to get this done, and we'd like to get it done. But if there's more costs, which seems quite a bit, I'm not sure how far we can go because we're only a small group.
Right. Well, Austin, that's a good point. And the reason that we even talk about reconsidering whether or not there should be a connection fee is because if there is a situation like this where you are paying to have what's essentially a water main installed to the property, that's essentially the infrastructure that other people would be paying in their connection fee. So you're doing the work to get that line in rather than the town is.
Yes.
And we have precedent also, in terms of Cumberland Farms and, their situation and others. So we have to discuss it, Austin, but I wouldn't get too fired up about it.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to give you our side of it at this point.
Yep, no,
So it's all
appreciate
very clear, so we have an understanding. Because the reality is, if your next meeting, when you put it on your agenda, this is something we want to do sooner than later. So it's not like we want to wait till next year. We really want to do this more this fall.
Yeah. No, we would just need to put it on for, say, like the next meeting.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
That works for me.
Works for me.
So,
And Jim, to your question, I will speak with John Aprea. He's actually off today, so he couldn't be on the call. But just from an operations standpoint, see if he has any questions or anything else from him. So he will be in the office tomorrow, and I'll get right back to the board if he has anything that he needs to investigate operationally.
In particular, I'm concerned about the 2-inch pipe, if that'll suffice.
Eric, you should know that when Roy was still working with us, that he and I did walk that property and looked for where the main is on Woods Lane, and this all seemed doable to Roy as well in terms of the
And we understand that we have a stub at the base of the hill, but that hill is a moving hill, and we do not want to disturb any part of it, and neither does Jack if we don't have to, because that really can cause a lot more problems than necessary. And that's one of our other concerns. That's why this works for us much better.
right. Okay. All right.
And Roy certainly had an extensive knowledge of the system and working with you guys. So if he was in a good place on it, it's unlikely that we would have anything different.
Good. All right. I appreciate it.
Any
So
other
at this point,
comments on this? All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
thank you.
Yep.
Take care.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So let's go back and start at on the first item that was on our agenda was the Mass Works application. Just to let you know that the application has been submitted. We sent it in electronically on Thursday from Town Hall. And the only thing we need to do at this point is the following town meeting on the 12th, we will need to let the Office of Housing and Economic Development know the outcome of the vote on the issue of the borrowing authorization. We don't need to do that right away, but in the event that that we are approved for a grant and we don't have authorization from the town for borrowing either through the town meeting or the ballot question, we will need to let them know that in fact that we will have to postpone this until another vote from the town. But because the expectation is that as soon as we get a notification of the board that we would be expected to begin work on the project, which we can't do if we don't have approval from the town. Any comments?
Great job.
It's over. Thank God it's done with. And we had a lot of support on this from various groups and people. Julian Sear, Sarah Peak, both submitted letters on this. Also, a number of the housing groups throughout the region have submitted letters of support. I think we're in a good spot on all of that. Again, the issues are going to be, the level of preparedness, because Mass Works does expect that we'll be shovel ready. There's still a lot of work to do on this, and Mike Bravado is going to be looking into trying to get us approved for a housing choice community, which was one of the things that we were still going to work on that, because if we can get that in place by next spring, that will make it all the easier for us to get an approval on this.
I do have one question, and maybe this kind of goes to the next item, the town meeting discussion. But I noticed in your the piece that you sent around regarding the justification that we don't talk about backup. This is a backup for Outer Cape and some of the other businesses in terms of trying to characterize the benefits a little more. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I think that, we try to be very careful about what we say regarding any potential hookups that there. In the case of Outer Cape Health, I know that they have, they spent considerable amount of money to put in the new well there. And this is something, Eric, that I know you guys, I believe, are the water system operator for Outer Cape Health as well. So, and I don't know the status of that well, but I know when I was working there, there was concern that even if there wasn't a well put in at Outer Cape Health, it would eventually have to be replaced, or there would need to be a connection to the municipal water system.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to predict what's going to happen there, but I think just as I think of it more like an insurance policy, that it just simply backs up that facility and that operation. So regardless of what happens, they've got choices going forward.
And we did get a letter from Outer Cape Health supporting the project.
Okay.
And they stressed the importance of having the potential for fire protection there at the property.
Right.
Less so than or more so than the fact that there would be source of domestic water there at the, because I don't think they'd be prepared in the near future to hook up to the system, given the costs that they've already incurred. So
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense until or unless they had well issues, but we're not going to be able to put in a main in a moment, in like a, less than 1 year's notice suddenly because they suddenly have problems with their well.
So it was mentioned in the, if we would, raise that again at the town meeting, that the new water main will support those businesses that are on Briar Lane and Route 6, Moby Dick's and Outer Cape Health. Anything else on that? So Kurt, back to the point about the discussion at town, what we need to do for a town meeting. I think that material that I presented the other night at the pre-town meeting forum is essentially what we would use for the stressing points like you just mentioned there. And since we're limited to about 5 minutes of presentation at the meeting, so that comes out to roughly 5.5 minutes, that document. It will be part of it will be printed and will be part of the materials that are available to people who attend the town meeting on Saturday the 12th.
I happened to run into Mia last week, I think it was, and are you still planning on doing a video that we might be able to push out?
Yeah, Elaine and I did a video last week, a question and answer kind of thing,
Okay.
with Rebecca's help. And Rebecca maybe can tell us where that is now in terms of if it's been turned over to me.
Mia has it, and she said she was just going to edit it a little bit just for the time parts, the beginning, and so that there's not as much lag time. And she would post it and send it to me as soon, so I can check in with her. But it should be up by tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
As soon as it's available, I'll shoot it out to the forum and see if we can get distribution out to the forum. Then.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
a good. Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic, Tim.
Anything else on that? All I would say is for those of us who are Wellfleet residents, get out and vote.
We had a good turnout yesterday, so hopefully next Tuesday, there are quite a bit of mail-in ballots. So they all went out today, so.
Good. All right, well, Kurt, I'd ask if you would take us through the next issue, which is the issue of the potential of a perk test at the town landfill.
Sure. So the wastewater committee, as part of the 208 process, is required by DEP to do this analysis of the transfer station site to make sure that it would be suitable as a sewage treatment location and be able to handle the town's entire wastewater output. And so in order to do that, we've engaged a consultant that has come out there to look at the site and are going to run a series of infiltration tests, drilling a well, setting up a pit. And basically the setting up of the pit is basically, you can think of it like putting out a swimming pool. They dump a certain amount of water in there and then measure how quickly it absorbs into the soil, and that allows them to determine whether it would be suitable for 400,000 gallons per day of flow from wastewater. And so anyway, this is a required test by DEP, in order for us to move forward on a wastewater plan, an overall wastewater plan. So in looking at that and looking at the amount of water, I actually reached out to Neil, and we kind of talked about whether there would be any impacts on the Coles Neck, infrastructure if they were drawing the amount of water that they would need to do this test. And it turns out they're probably at about 6 gallons, per hour. And Neil said, geez, that's probably not gonna have much of an impact. And the other question was where we might be able to get the water. And the transfer station has a faucet on the building. I did do a test on that. It's running at about 14 gallons, per minute. So there's more than adequate flow just out of that little faucet. The other location is either of the fire hydrants that are on Coles Neck Road. And anyways, at the end of the day, in order to get the water that we need to basically the northeast corner of the transfer station site where this pit is being erected, it's a pretty long run, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet. So Neil said you're going to at least need to use a fire department hose because of the sizing. No matter what the run is, you need a pretty large hose. So the fire department is cooperating. The chief and the assistant chief have been out to look at either of those spots. I think they actually want to run from one of the fire hydrants instead of the transfer station. But that's just kind of long-winded background. The bottom line is that, I wanted to come to the board and at least request that the amount of water that's going to be used, which could be between 15,000 and 20,000 gallons, that the water board consider, waiving any fees associated with that. So, if it was a residential homeowner that was contributing the water, or if it was the transfer station, I don't know who pays for water that comes out of the fire hydrants, but just that, we could meter the water and certainly make sure somebody didn't have to pay for it, as part of this process, which ultimately is helping the town as a whole.
Well, you said you gave it a number of 400,000 gallons a day.
The 400,000 gallons is what the amount of wastewater flow that is projected if we were taking wastewater from the entire town and moving it to the transfer station for wastewater processing. So it doesn't have anything to do with water. That's just the wastewater. For this test, the estimate was about 15,000 to 20,000 gallons of water just to conduct this infiltration test.
Right. And is this the site that is proposed out there? This is the only site that's available in town, is that correct?
Well, there are other potential sites. This one just happens to be the most heavily characterized, which helps reduce the ultimate cost of getting it approved as a potential site. It is one of the few with the amount of capacity that we'd likely need that's within the town's control. And that's also something that DEP is looking for, that the town has control over the site, that the site can handle that amount. In the event that we, as a backup, need to build a sewage treatment facility, this is what they're requiring.
What's the sentiment of the committee on the use of that site? Any concerns?
Not I.
But I mean, from the wastewater committee, is everyone on board that this is an appropriate site?
Yeah, we actually, we did move, I think 6 months ago, to include this as our site. There were a lot of discussions. Helen was engaged in some discussions with us. Ryan was engaged in those discussions. Environmental Partners originally did the analytic work, looking for a site that would be suitable within the town of Wellfleet. The town doesn't have control over too many locations that you'd be able to put a wastewater treatment plant. And obviously, a lot of the concerns have to do with, you want it to be relatively downhill from where your dense areas of wastewater generation are. So that minimizes pumping requirements. You want to have it relatively close to those locations. But you also want to be mindful of, off gassing from the facility and odors and that sort of thing. So when you start to, look at all of the potential locations around town, because there's already odors at a transfer station, it's a logical place. There's more than enough land, and we're pretty confident that the sand structure and the previously characterized geologic formation there is going to be more than adequate to handle the inflows that would come from if it had to become a wastewater treatment plant. So there really weren't any concerns. We did kick it around and did look at a number of other locations, but this is the one that just consistently came to the top as the most reasonable.
How would this impact the old, the dump that was, or would it have any impact on what's in the ground already at the transfer station?
No, and that's part of the characterization process is looking at where the flows would ultimately go once they get into the ground. And make sure that there isn't any impact on the Herring River, make sure there isn't any impact on transfer station operations, because Coles Neck is currently on, town water. There aren't really any well impacts of concern. So that's the process that the consultant is going through to make sure that, the outflows wouldn't have any negative impacts.
Okay, well, that was my question, was in terms of wells, properties that are not currently on the water system, would there be any out there that where we would then have an obligation to provide them with municipal water if this site were used?
I don't think so, because the characterization that's been done so far indicates that the outflow from that location is toward the Herring River. There's just nobody between this location and the Herring River, and there's an awful lot of acreage in between. So I don't think there's, at the end of the day, I don't see that there's going to be any negative impact on the Herring River, and I don't see any negative impacts on any homeowners nearby.
So do you need a vote from the commission?
Yeah, it'd be great if the commission were to vote to at least waive the any water fees associated with doing this test. That would be great.
I would support that. Catherine?
Fine, yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like, that, we have the majority here. Tom's not with us, but I would say we're in support of it, that waiving any fees for, for use of the water for this evaluation.
Terrific. Thank you. That's great.
And just from Whitewater's perspective, Kurt, I think all the points that you brought up as far as how you guys have arrived at that location make 100% sense. Just everything that you mentioned with location-wise, proximity to town, a site that's already kind of characterized, and the community seems to be comfortable with that, and the slight potential odors that go along with it, also allowing for gravity sewer flow wherever you can have it. Those are all really important things with the wastewater treatment facility, and then the ground's ability to accept that and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense. And regarding any of the testing, if it ends up being fire hydrants and hooking up to Coles Neck, we'll just do some coordination with John and his team. I'd like to have them just go out beforehand, just make sure everything's set up for the hydrants and everything, so you guys have smooth sailing go the day that you're there. I've talked to John about that when I was out on site reviewing Coles Neck and things and some of the other locations. And, they've been bleeding stuff off, doing some testing there and things. So I don't foresee any issues, but we'll just give them as much of a heads up as possible to be in a position to support you for that test.
Thanks. Fire department is obviously coordinating. The chief is coordinating that. Hillary and I have been working with him on that. So the timing is mid-September. So it's not urgent, but well, I guess it is getting close, isn't it? Summer just
Flies, but we don't need a huge heads up on it, but just a little bit of time on kind of as the date gets closer. And, we'll probably do some pre-testing just to make sure everything goes smoothly for you when you're communicating with, everybody involved with the perk test and the fire department. So.
Great. The only thing that came up, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, was it sounds like, I haven't talked to the chief lately, but it sounded like they were inclined to use the fire hydrants, which are maybe 1,500 feet. It's a pretty long run. The spigot on the transfer station gatehouse is probably 500 feet closer, but they didn't have, the issue I think was that they didn't have an ability to adapt from, the faucet to their 2-inch fire hose. So I don't know if you guys had anything like that.
Where is the nearest hydrant then?
The nearest hydrant's on Coles Neck at the entrance to the transfer station. There's 2 of them actually, but one a little closer to Fox Trail and the other one a little closer to the Fork.
I could make an adapter for the gatehouse to a 2-inch pipe that would be provided by the fire department.
I'll talk to the chief and see if they want to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's them, it's their hose.
That's a lot less work.
Yeah, I would think. So thank you, Neil. I really appreciate that. I'll make sure to give him a call tomorrow and let him know that.
Good. All right, well, if there's nothing more on that, I'd say let's move on. And Kurt, well, you're on a roll here, so why don't you continue with the discussion on the Mayo Creek restoration and the impact on Harborside Village.
Sure. So there's some of what I don't want to say unless we want to go into executive session, because it may have to do with negotiations relative to how we may want to approach Harborside Village on a water service. But in general, to the extent that they have a backup master metered connection to the water system, it reduces the kind of concerns that a lot of the people in the Harborside Village may have about Mayo Creek restoration. And Mayo Creek restoration is, the Mayo Creek Committee did provide its report to the Board of Selectmen, I think about 6 months ago. It was approved and adopted by the Board of Selectmen, so it's a project that the board wants to move forward and continue to pursue. It's part of our, just not only our ecologic restoration of some of these impaired salt marshes, but in the case of Mayo Creek, it's a really critical piece of improving harbor water quality because there's an awful lot of nitrogen that's coming out of that particular leg. And so to the extent that, the tidal flow can be improved, that's going to reduce nitrogen flowing into the harbor, which is a really important feature for our wastewater plan. And if we increase harbor tidal exchange, the concern that's been there from the Harborside residents is their water supply could be negatively impacted either by by salinity or the tidal exchange could affect their water table somehow. So even though the engineers have indicated that wouldn't be the case, Woods Hole Group did an extensive study looking at all of those issues, and there's been similar work done on the Herring River Restoration Project that indicates the same, that for the amount of tidal restoration that's being talked about, water table really wouldn't be affected. But long story short, if the water board were to simply say something like, we would provide a standing offer of a, no cost master metered water service drop. And I was kind of thinking about how you'd price it for water use, because they've talked about not wanting to pay for water. But I think, we could consider if they were to come forward and want to, take us up on that option, to give them some certainty, maybe say something like, we charge you a flat rate at the lowest, commercial rate for water, or the marginal cost or something like that, whichever was lower. Either way, we'd be covering our costs plus whatever, whatever contribution to fixed expenses we would need. But anyway, my thought was we could pick up, if they take it up, we've got a very large customer that we would, if we're not putting meters at each of the, trailer sides, we're saving a lot of metering costs. For us, the cost is relatively small. And in this case, picking up a big water customer would be a real benefit to the water system.
Neil, you had some concerns about where the connection would have to take place at this site.
Yeah, I suspect that the connection, the biggest connection is in the rear of the site, opposite the Kendrick Avenue entrance.
So it's quite a distance from Kendrick Avenue back to where their well house is now.
Yeah, the connections probably reduce in size as the distance from the well site.
So,
To the well site, it's probably about 500 feet or so from Kendrick Ave, from where the main goes by there.
Yeah, I suspect that is a pretty close estimate.
so what would the next steps be on this, Kurt?
Well, I think from Unreal standpoint, and I think from the town standpoint, the easiest thing for the water board to do would be to have some kind of a motion that said, we'd like to make an offer, a standing offer to Harborside Village that should they decide to connect, we'd provide the connection at no cost, with a water rate to be negotiated if and when at the time they decided to connect, that would look like either our lowest commercial rate or some marginal cost of water plus coverage of fixed expenses, whichever is lower.
Well, yeah, I think you had suggested before, we may have to go into an executive session to deal with this. The reality is that we're bumping up against the connection fee issue again here with this. And we've had, other instances where this has been something that we said we really need to resolve. I mean, particularly if we're moving forward with the plan to bring water down onto Briar Lane, we have to figure out what we're doing with that aspect of the system there. So I think we're going to have to make some decisions about how we go forward with this, whether it's by bringing in a consultant to help us with determining, revising the rate structure and how that would impact on existing properties on the system and any new hookups in the system.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something we've been talking about for a long time, but what's clear is I think the long-term viability of the water system is going to depend on collecting money from water rates, and the idea that we were going to somehow support the system on connection fees, that's a one-time charge. That goes away. It's already obvious that that's not a sustainable method for the system to maintain financial viability.
Well, I'd like to see us put this on, to keep this on the agenda. I think there's some work that we need to do before we even consider entering into any kind of agreement with Harborside, and that concluding we need to get some numbers here as to what their annual usage is. We don't have that yet. I mean, I think we can get that through probably it's available through Hillary's office in files that they have there. But also getting a better sense of what the cost would be associated with installation of a line from Kendrick Avenue to the well house there, and who would be responsible for that.
Right.
Okay. So I'd like to keep this on the agenda, that we continue to review this. And Rebecca, I'll be asking you to try to get some information for us from Hillary's office.
Sure. They also, someone from Harborside Village called me on Monday asking about connecting to town water. So I said that it was on the agenda for tonight and they were more than welcome to come and listen, but no one's here. So probably best that you do go into executive session at some point.
Yeah.
Rebecca, do you know who it was?
I don't remember his name. He was on the board maybe, or he was like the head of the trustees for the whole.
Yeah, okay, I know who it is.
Yep. So he was asking, and I said, you actually are on the agenda for next Wednesday night, for this coming Wednesday. So he asked directions on how to get into the meeting. I gave it to him, and that was that, but he's not on, so.
I'm glad that they're interested. You know, they've had a very different, attitude up till now, and John has been working hard to try to assuage their concerns, as time's gone by, but in the past has just hit a complete brick wall with them as far as them being completely against any kind of restoration of Mayo Creek. So it's been very contentious up till now from his standpoint, but I'm sensing that they're reaching out is a very positive thing.
All right. Well, if there's nothing more, I say let's move on and keep this on the agenda. The only other item we have on here now is the Wellfleet Lake Historical Society. There's a couple of things about that. One of which is a discussion about the connection fee there. And I had gotten a call from them last week about what they needed to do to do the hookup for the fire suppression system. And as you know, that they've installed the 6-inch main there. I talked with John Aprea about this as well, and John pointed out to me that in an instance like this, that there would not be a meter installed on that line, because there isn't the expectation is that line is not going to get used except in the event of a fire. So that the need for a connection for a meter and a connection fee is probably something that we don't need to be concerned with because the connection fee there would have been a commercial fee, and I don't think that was charged on the only other building that we have in town that has a sprinkler system in it. That's the building on the corner of Holbrook and Main. I don't know, Eric, if you have any comments on that.
No, I would default to John on that. He's certainly more in the know on the technical side of things and the project. But if we need a real definitive answer, I'm happy to circle back with our team on that as well. Just have John discuss with some of our other team members, but he certainly knows better than I do.
Okay. Well, the other item that came up about the Wellfleet Historical Society was that the neighbor across the street at 257 Main is now saying that it has to install a new septic system, and it is it's an advanced system, not just a straight Title V, and that impacts on their well, so that he's will be hooking up to the town's water system for that. But it also impacts on the existing domestic well at the Historical Society. So I think that they're in some discussions, and all I want to say about this is, I think that this is, in terms of the connection fee for the Wellfleet Historical Society for their domestic water, that's something that if they are trying to negotiate who's going to pay for that, that's a discussion that needs to happen between the Historical Society and the neighbor across the street who has to, whose new septic system is going to be within 100 feet of the existing domestic well at the Historical Society. So I don't feel that we should be getting in the middle on that one. Any comments?
You're exactly right.
I mean, because I think we're going to have more of these situations come up like this as septic systems fail or a well fails, and then there is an issue that involves neighboring properties. That's something that we really can't get in the middle of. We couldn't.
No, I do. Eric, I was going to actually ask you, because Whitewater does so much work, around Massachusetts. Do you get involved at all in rate design, or have you come across people that have been involved in rate design for water systems?
I have not specifically, but I can certainly discuss with some team members. And internally, I mean, we run like the town of Southbridge and some other larger municipal systems. So we have some experience in it, but I personally don't. But if you're looking for some direction on it, I think I can help with that.
Okay.
I'll put it on my list and circle back with the group.
Thank you. Kurt, I was thinking that we might want to consider using some of the funds that are available for the consultant fees that we were awarded last year, that we could use a portion of that to get some assistance on, evaluating the rate structure and coming up with recommendations for any changes to it.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
If there's nothing else on that, I'd like to move to approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve: the meeting of August 4th and the meeting of August 18th. Any comments or questions about the minutes of the 4th of August?
They look fine.
Who was here? I think we were all at the meeting. So Kurt or Neil, do you have any comments?
Nope.
I don't. I would move that we approve minutes of August 4th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
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 And aye. So it's 4 in favor of that. All right. And for the minutes of the meeting of the 18th. Any comments, questions?
None for me.
Do I hear a motion?
I'd move that we approve the minutes of August 18th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Great. All right. So we are finished with that. And any new business, Rebecca, that we should be considering?
No, I have nothing for you, other than make sure you're at the town meeting.
Right. It will be, yeah.
I have a question why we circulated the thing that, Helen wanted sent out.
Yeah, okay, good point. So, and that's something I would want to work with Rebecca on, that that Helen sent out what was a part of an agreement that had to do with the properties around the landfill. This goes back to, I think, the 90s, that those properties were granted the opportunity to connect to the water system at no cost except for usage fees. And that had to do with the fact that there was contamination in the wells due to the landfill out there. So there were a number of properties identified that have not been had not hooked up to the system. And I don't know, and if in reading that document, it talks about properties that had a building permit in place. And I don't know which of those properties still are still undeveloped. So that's what I was going to ask Rebecca to help us with here. If she can go through the files, compare that list that we have that Helen sent over that has the addresses of those properties. And if those are, if they have a connection already in place, then obviously that we don't have to be concerned about those. But I'd like to know how many of those properties are still outstanding in terms of not having connected to the system, and those would be ones that would have an obligation to provide them a connection in the event that they choose to connect.
I can do that.
I kind of have a question about that, though. It's curious to me that, I mean, there's two issues here, but one, it doesn't make any sense to me that if somebody had access to a free water connection, that they wouldn't have taken advantage of it by now. You know, if they had, the town obviously still needs to deal with the issue of liability relative to well contamination, which could happen, you know, could still happen now or in the future. So that issue probably hasn't gone away. But one would imagine that if somebody had issues with their well and had a free water service, that they would have connected. And you know, and of course, you know, as far as what Rebecca's doing, it would be sort of drawing a line in the sand between, you know, folks who had a building permit at the time this document was drafted versus people who got a permit since then. But even people who got a permit since then, I'm not sure that changes our legal liability relative to any kind of transfer station impact on their well. So, you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, the town's liability is the town's liability regardless of what point in time you want to talk about.
Well, I think that if there are undeveloped lots out there, and there are, as to whether or not those, and you know, they may not have a building permit in place on those, then what is our obligation to provide a free connection, if they have not, if they've not been developed?
Well, in Eastham's case, you know, just to think about it a little bit differently, I'm not advocating for anything, but just kind of describing stuff. Eastham, I don't believe Eastham waived the connection fees for people who are around the transfer station. I think everybody in town, you know, they voted for the system, so collectively the town's paying for it. But I don't think the connection fee structure is any, or the water charges are any different for people who are, you know, actually have well impacts in Eastham versus people who don't.
Did you get a chance to read through that document, Kurt?
I did, and that's why I'm raising some of these issues, because you know, what kept striking me as I was reading the document is it's old, it's outdated, and it may largely, you know, we should think about as a board whether it's been subsumed by our, you know, it's part of the water system, and why one part of the water system would have a separate, you know, water system agreement doesn't really make sense to me. I think, you know, as I looked at it, it seems like a legacy thing that we may want to think about cleaning up as far as incorporating, you know, them into our standard agreement, if you know what I'm saying.
I think we need to get a further analysis on that document as to what really our liabilities are here. But Rebecca, if you could start by going through that list and seeing which ones of those are actually connected to our system and those that are not.
Okay, and Helen sent those over, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But other than that, Jim, what it appeared to be was, Helen's kind of reasoning as to, why we should, or I guess the overarching concern there is that the current system might not be adequate for the number of users on the Coles, that are in that area. I don't, Neil can answer this or Eric can answer it, but I don't believe there's any capacity issue on the Coles Next system as it's currently designed that would prohibit or prevent anybody else from connecting.
There isn't, and because the reality is that once the system, once the connection was made on Pole Dyke Road, West Main Street, and into the center of town, that the restriction that existed because of the Coles Neck main no longer was a problem.
Right, but I mean, in terms of water adequacy there, I mean, that was the other thing that I was saying, once the connection is made up Briar Lane to Main Street, the system can be backfed as well. So you've got water supply from now both directions.
Right.
It's hard for me to imagine that we'd ever have any kind of capacity constraints there. So her political, I guess, or, argument, what it seemed to be was, we need to do something there because if we don't, we're not going to be able to supply enough water to those people who are promised water. But I don't think that's the case.
So, well, this item will remain on the agenda now for a while because we do need to do some more homework on it. But I just wanted to get it out there to everybody because it was sent to us by one of our select board.
I think as far as capacity, I think, really to both Kurt and Jim, both your points on that, it would seem that there's capacity there at Coles Neck to be able to do that. But some further homework and things like that to be done in conjunction with some of the other items that we're investigating regarding that source.
Right.
And also keeping in mind, Eric, if the main is, if those walls are connected into the main up Briar Lane, and you've got backfeeding available as well.
I think that's an option and things like that is, in doing that is, if the situation arose, there can be some water quality issues and things like that sometimes, but are we physically capable of being able to supply water? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. All right, so our next meeting would be in 2 weeks, correct, Rebecca?
You are correct. It looks like it would be on the 16th, the 15th, because if you're going to go to a Tuesday.
So that'll be after town meeting.
Right after town meeting.
So I would say, yes, let's plan on Tuesday.
What time, Jim?
I would say at 4 o'clock, and we keep it at 4.
Yeah, I like 4.
Works for us here at Whitewater as well.
Okay, great. Gail, do you have any comments?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, Jim, I wanted to say I watched the pre-town meeting presentation that you did, and I thought it was great. So, and the second thing is, if I had a very large size sign supporting the article, I would put it in my yard because I'm located in on the way to the dump. Just a thought. Maybe I'll make a homemade one, but other people might want a sign.
Good point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Article 10, right?
You are Article 10, yes.
Or, well, but on the ballot, what is it?
number 1 on the ballot.
Yeah.
Talking about the warrant, there's one other item that I just want to bring you up to date on that, and that's the recycling committee. I got a call or an email from Christine asking what our position was on the request for the individual water bottle ban and what our position is on that. And I just reiterated what we had discussed at the last meeting. We discussed this and said that while we support the idea of this, we don't want to be the only town out there that's doing this. So, and since this would not be implemented until next June at the earliest,
You want to bring that?
I'd like to reserve a decision or a position on that until next spring. Okay, so if there's nothing more, I say let's stand adjourned, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Tuesday.
Okay.
Or at town meeting, I'll be there up front.
Great, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, Eric.